Thanks for joining us for another episode of our Coming Back from COVID web series. Today I am joined by my panel of experts and we'll be discussing how to facilitate positive adaptation and coping in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic that we're still experiencing and some of the many other interesting things that the year 2020 has brought to light or amplified or presented to us all as challenges and things to learn more about and think through. So I'd like to welcome my panel to introduce themselves. And Bill, why don't you get us started?
Hi, I'm Bill Pearson. I'm Program Coordinator with Rochester Regional Children and Youth Unit.
All right. And Earl, how about you?
Okay, I'm Earl Green, and I am the Early Childhood Mental Health Consultant with the Children's Institute.
Great. And Melissa?
Hi, I'm Dr. Melissa Heatley. I'm a child psychologist at URMC.
Thank you all so much. So the first thing that I want to talk about is that we know our young people have been back in their learning spaces for a few months now, and we know those spaces may look and feel differently than they have in the past. And I'm wondering if you can talk through some of the behaviors we might see from kids as they're continuing to adapt to social distancing, to changes in routines, and just the new kind of look and feel of their environments.
I mean, I think I've seen a lot of kids over the past few weeks, and we really are seeing a range of responses. One of the things that's really remarkable to me, first off, is how resilient kids are. And for the majority of kids, we're seeing that they're a little stressed, they're a little bit uncertain, but they're also playing, they're having fun with their family, and they're kind of getting on with their lives, even more so than adults, a little bit. But there are some kids who are struggling more and struggling with feelings of anxiety, feelings of worry, anger, nervousness, daydreaming, zoning out. And those are the kids that I'm worried about a little bit more, the kids who are having trouble adjusting.
Sure.
We've recently seen a lot of the overachievers who are really struggling right now. The ones who thrive on being in the school, thrive on the education, thrive on interacting with their friends. They're having such a hard time right now. Our referrals that we're in the schools that we're in, so many of them are just so highly stressed. They don't know how to handle it right now. So we're doing a lot of supporting, a lot of saying, we can get through this. Resiliency, like Melissa was saying, is huge. We have to try to support them. It's also working with the teachers and helping them understand that, remember, the high achievers are the ones who really want to do well, and we maybe have to reach out for those, look out for them a little bit and reach out to them. So it's just those overachievers who want to do so well, and education is so important to them that they're struggling right now.
Yeah.
And I do know that there are some families who are struggling, and they're struggling because they have not grown accustomed to being in this virtual platform. And a lot of students are struggling, particularly those students who are living in communities, particularly communities of color, and there's a lot of families who don't have access to the technology, which adds to the stress, and also getting their children to really focus on this virtual platform. And some of the teachers that I've been talking with at the child care centers are looking at different behaviors that they're not seeing in the classroom. And children are being resistant and being on the virtual platform. And then on the other hand, you have another group of children who enjoy this platform. And I think, when we talk about building resilience, parents play a very vital role in that, because at some levels, children can naturally show some resilience, but for the most part, it is what is modeled by their parents, and they feed off of that. And so the more supportive the parents are in this process, the better and the more the child can build that resilience.
I think to that point, I think it's really important to mention that it's not just the kids who are experiencing stress. In many ways, are the adults, the parents, the caregivers
Yep.
are more stressed than the kids are. And that's because there's a lot going on. We have role strain for parents
Yep.
who are now teaching and also parenting and also their kids' entire social world. There's financial uncertainty, resource uncertainty, health uncertainty, and a lot of community unrest that is very stressful for families. And that trickles down to kids, and affects how kids are doing too.
Yes.
It's such a great question to ask the kids. How's mom and dad doing with this?
Yeah.
You know, when we were, how are they doing? Because, you know, then the kids are, the girl's greatest thing about kids, they're honest. They'll tell you, and they'll say, oh, they're really having a hard time. That's what's our job, to make sure we support the parent.
Right.
Make sure to reach out to the parent and say, how's it going? How can we help you? Talk to us. We need somebody to talk to. You can talk to anybody. It doesn't have to be a therapist, but you really need to resort to reaching out, because we're isolating. We're putting ourselves into these, you know, winter's coming. We're going to be isolated again, and it's going to be that more and more pressure. You have to develop those support systems, people who you can talk to, people you can vent to, people you can share your highs and your lows. So it's important. It's a family problem. It's a universal problem, and we have to just be aware that it's going to get even harder soon.
Yeah, I think that's great to keep in mind. And I was going to ask you guys, I think when we started this, kind of thinking about this question, and Earl, you mentioned explicitly young kids in early childhood. So that's our real littles. Are you guys seeing these same kind of challenges with the older students that you might be interacting with, high school age students? Are they coping in those same kind of ways as the really young kids, or are you seeing different behaviors from them or different needs?
It's
For
interesting
me,
it's interesting going to a school right now. It's so quiet. It's very different than I've ever experienced before. It's very quiet. So I say the kids are doing really well on the most part. I'm just hearing Dr. Mendoza saying a good example would be how schools, if people can model how schools are doing the COVID and protecting and doing this, it would be great for the families as well, if we could, or businesses. I see the kids doing well. The town that I live in, I'm out walking. I feel guilty. I'm not wearing my mask, but the kids are out in the community, you know, and doing that. So I think the kids, like, go back, they know what they got to do. But I worry about the fatigue. I think people are getting tired of it. And when you get tired of it, you start going back to old ways. And that's the risky part.
So I think the important part is that not all stress is bad stress. Kids have to handle stress, and part of it is that we as adults have to teach them how to handle stress. And I'm seeing educators doing a phenomenal job in talking to their students about stress and about the COVID-19 pandemic and about violence and racism, and doing a really good job in saying what's going on in your community and in your life, and how can we cope as a community. Where I'm seeing kids struggle more is where they're not talking to anyone, where they're not reaching out to anyone, where they don't have the opportunity for an educator to check in on them. I get worried about our kids who are full remote and who are maybe at home all day without much social interaction. And I worry about how kind of self-perpetuating that can be, and how isolated and alone some of our kids are.
Like they could be they're like the forgotten. They're out there, out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah.
And that makes it hard. Those are the ones that I worry too as well. The ones who adult contact.
Right. And coupled with that is the how well, at least for some of the older students, how well they're able to navigate through the pandemic as well as the civil unrest, and how they have actually been participating in some of the efforts, the protest. And I do know, for example, my granddaughter, she's going on 16. And I do know that she's been very much involved, very much in tune with what's happening, doing very well. And all of them are experiencing this COVID fatigue like we are. But at the same time, they're paying attention, they're focused, and they know what's going on. And what really made me feel good that even in the midst of all of this, a lot of these young people have actually spearheaded some of the protests and some of the activism around the civil unrest and systemic racism, and really doing their research and understanding what's going on. My granddaughter actually did an essay on it. She read my article entitled "No Justice, No Peace in the Absence of Truth," and she did an essay on that for her, I think, for the 10th grade, and she did an excellent job. Excellent job. And I think she's in the 11th grade, but she did an excellent job on it, and it really showed me how much, not just her, how much they're actually paying attention to what's happening in our communities. And so that's a good side. And then another side, you have others who have been, and I haven't heard too much about a lot of the young people involved with violence and disruption in the community, but they are aware. And again, these are some of the older students who are helping those younger ones on this virtual platform too, because one of the things I thought about was the parents of a lot of these children have to work,
Mhm.
and a lot of these students are being watched by their older siblings, and so they're able to maintain some level of consistency in their academics, as well as get involved with some of the civil issues that we're facing. Yeah.
But you guys segued me really greatly, really well into my next question, which was uh, in all the young with all the young people that you're working with, and with everything that's going on in the world, from the pandemic to the social and racial injustices to our political sphere changing, what's really giving you hope in this time? What are you seeing from young people that's making you think, oh yeah, they're going to be okay?
I do know what gives me hope is that, just based on what I just shared, we're looking at another generation of activists in our communities, who's invested in dismantling systemic racism
Mm-hmm.
and making and creating more of a real community where, I was explaining to someone today that this generation we're talking about, they are so engaged with one another, regardless of ethnicity, regardless of gender, and they are so involved. They look at the world differently than we do. They don't see the separation of color and ethnicity. They identify with one another, and because they share a lot of the same desires, the dreams, and the qualities, and they don't have they're not tainted with that ugliness of confusion and separation of people. Yeah, so it's all inclusive in their work.
Right. So you think there's negativity to social media, right? That
Yeah.
everybody talks, but there's so much positive on the social media.
Yes.
Growing up, we didn't know about this stuff. We didn't know. We lived in a TV was, it was TV, right?
Yeah.
It was okay. It wasn't when I grew up. There was nothing like that. But now, instantaneously, they have message. Some of it may be false, but so
Mm-hmm.
much of it is true. But it gives them an ability to filter whatever they want and become whatever they want. And
Yeah.
that's the part about social media.
Yeah. And
I'll
especially with
also
that
tell you,
creativity.
yeah, one of the things that surprised me about this pandemic is the number of kids I see playing outside. And that is something that's really changed since from last year to this year, where it was that I would go outside on a beautiful day. Today's a beautiful day in Rochester, and there wouldn't be that many kids out. And then I go outside today, and my neighbors' kids are playing basketball. I see other kids sitting on their front porch. I see others walking down the street, or reading a book under a tree. And I think some of it is that's about all there is to do these days. But also it's like watching childhood reemerge a little bit, and that to me is something that's really hopeful, and something that I see kids playing and being kids, which is a comfort to me.
Yeah.
Nothing better than hearing kids laugh.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's very cool. That's an awesome point. And that kind of leads me into my last kind of wondering from you guys, which is all around how do we cope with these times that are going to be uncertain for a while. We know, we're having this conversation in November 2020, and a lot of things are still very uncertain. And as Bill mentioned, we're going into the winter where things are going to continue to be uncertain. So I'm curious if you can share some strategies, some coping strategies that we can lean into, some things that our educators and our adults who work with young people can model, can teach, can explore in order to help their kids continue to navigate what we're all experiencing.
Well, self-empowerment is so huge. I think that goes back to watching those kids become leaders in their community for social justice and for change. Being able to find meaning amidst a crisis is something that helps you move from feeling really out of control to being able to grasp a sense of control and power, and develop a sense of hope. And that's really an effective way to build resilience for kids.
Yeah. And I want to go back to that creativity I mentioned, and this innovation. There are a number of young people who are doing things on the virtual platform that is a lot of fun. They're creating opportunities for people to connect. They're, whether it's via dance, singing, and I do know when I go on, I have an active social media page, and I really enjoy a lot of the talent and the creativity I'm seeing from these young people, where they can do a song, and you see them in one frame, and then they're also in other frames, but they're actually singing, and they're also doing the background harmonies to it, and it's just beautiful. So they're doing singing, the dancing, the little things they're doing on TikTok, just to just for humor. And what I'm looking at is them getting, keeping themselves busy, and also engaging other people. And it's pretty interesting how they do it. They are masters with this virtual platform and the social media, and they're just pulling people in where people can watch those videos and really enjoy themselves, coming up with different games that are challenging, a lot of fun for the whole family. So I'm seeing a lot of that. So and it becomes very encouraging to me, because it speaks to how resilient, again, they are, and how they're actually managing themselves through this pandemic, and also through all this civil unrest. And even with some who are looking at the civil unrest and the dealing with anti-racism, and being very creative in their poetry, writing poems and performing those things, and sending very powerful messages to one another, and keeping each other in line with what's happening. Yeah.
I think good news, we've been through it once already, right? So we know it worked.
Yep.
And we know it didn't work. Let's not repeat history. Let's not go back to let's say, oh, we're going to do this. Oh, that didn't work the last time. Then why would we do it again? But what worked? And explore and be creative. But we've been through it. we don't want to go through it again, but reality, like I think Melissa said, reality is it's coming. We're going to go through it. We're seeing that the levels are going higher. You can predict some things.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like you know, sometimes when I do therapy and stuff, I say, well, let's practice. Let's get ready for it, because like in a fire drills are meant for practice and getting ready for it. We don't practice fire drill during a fire. What can we do? Can we be planful? Can we think what we're going to do differently? Be creative. And we just learn from what we do, and we're going to get through it. We have to be positive. We're going to get through it. Like today, right? Beautiful day. Vaccine's been announced. There may be a vaccine out there. So celebrate those things. But yeah, we're going to go through it again. Don't make the same mistake over.
Yeah, I was going to ask you guys how, you know, in a clinical setting, or in even just an adult who's wanting to have a helpful, planful conversation with a young person, how do you start that conversation to say people have low points and everybody has low points, and how do we plan to make sure that we get through our low points with as much as well as we can? How do you start that conversation with someone who maybe you see needing it, or maybe it's those kids that we don't anticipate needing as much support, but you just want to make sure that they've got some ideas in place if they do happen to need it down the road?
In my world, I call it Columbo. I take a step down. I start asking questions. It looks like you may not be doing. Are you doing okay? Is everything all right? I'm afraid if you think you got to ask a question, don't hesitate. Ask it. If your gut's telling you a question, ask the question. But I always like putting that. It's just asking, being inquisitive, asking questions. And if you really think there's a problem, you confront the problem.
Yeah.
I think it's also really important to acknowledge that these are scary and hard times. It can be really tempting to jump to reassurance, like it'll be okay, we can get through this. Let's just think positively. And there's a time and a place for that. And also, there are scary things happening in the world and difficult things happening in the world, and saying and giving space to acknowledge that. And leaning into all of our feelings. You know, one of my favorite movies is Inside Out. I know that's like very stereotypical for a therapist, but you know, I watched it again with my 2-year-old the other night. And the thing I love about it is that the real message is that you can't push away your sadness. You can't push away your fear. You have to have all of them, and you have to have space for all of them to function as a human. And so the same thing goes when talking to your kids. Listen to their worries and listen to their fears and say, I hear you. And also, we're going to get through this. We can work together, and we are brave, and we are strong, and we can take care of each other. So accept the feeling and also create a story of safety and resilience to help support your kids.
Yeah. And, you know, I was thinking along the same lines, and that is just perfect, because it's very important to allow each other and give each other permission to feel. It's okay to feel, and it's okay to acknowledge that, and know that the support is there, and the idea of getting through this together is very important. One of the things that we know as we're dealing with children who are impacted by ACEs and toxic stress, one of the greatest things they can have is a healthy, supportive adult in their lives, and who can help them navigate through all of those feelings, and to be able to share, you know, especially within the family and with mentors and educators and communicating with these young people. It's okay to share your feelings and how you're doing. There's nothing wrong with even asking, how do you feel today? You know, and then follow up with, you know, I've been feeling kind of fatigue, and I'm still trying to get things together. There's nothing wrong with an adult sharing that and saying, and then opening the door for them to share as well, and then go through that healing and recovery process together.
Right. The adults are the role models right now, so let's take advantage of that.
Yeah, I think that idea of modeling and giving kids the language, and the point that all three of you mentioned is, Earl, I'm going to echo you, that idea of navigating, where you're not suppressing, you're not overcoming
Right.
necessarily, you're not getting rid of uncomfortable feelings, we're just navigating through the comfort and the discomfort.
Mhm.
And that's great to keep in mind. Are there any last thoughts or things that you might want to share as we're thinking about educators working with young people in non-traditional spaces or spaces that are feeling a little bit different or are hybrid spaces? Anything that you might want to just advise them to keep in mind or think about as we continue on this path?
I want to make sure that they're taking care of themselves, the teachers. Make sure that you're doing it as well, because
Yes.
it's so hard right now that, you know, just make sure that you're taking care of yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it is hard. And as adults, we sometimes don't want to do that, but just remember that you need to take care of, you got to role model that as well for your.
Yeah.
Right. And that self-care is extremely important. And not to be confused with a lot of, when we think about self-care, um, I think about one's ability to treat themselves. You have to decide that today is your day. When was the last time you actually went to a movie theater by yourself, or especially during this time of pandemic, sometimes what I do for my self-care, one day I wake up, I just feel like putting a suit and tie on. Make me feel good. That's my self-care. But doing whatever, and being very creative in that. Self-care is not always about a spa day, or, it's about, doing what needs to be done to make you feel at ease, make you feel comfortable, and even sometimes looking in the mirror, just encouraging yourself, you know, whatever it takes. But that self-care is very important. And just like um, what you mentioned earlier, Caitlin, about the taking that vacation time while your office is in the attic, your vacation time was still at home. So that vacation was not going up to that attic.
Yep, and
Or
it was
spending
great.
time in your living space and enjoy your family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just have to echo that call to self-care for our educators, for our parents, for our kids, if you may be listening. And if you find that self-care is becoming really hard, if it's becoming a
Hmm.
challenge, or if you are noticing the same is true for one of the kids that you're supporting or one of your kids, reach out and ask for help. We have a lot of great resources in Rochester, at Genesee Mental Health, at U of R, at Children's Institute, and other organizations throughout town. There are great resources that can be accessed through 211, as well as your health professional has a bank of resources that they can connect you to. Pediatricians are very well versed in supporting kids with behavioral health needs related to stress, anxiety, worry, depression. Reach out to your pediatrician, reach out to your doctor, to your EAP organization, or one of our community partners in this area, and take the moment to ask for help if you need
Yeah.
it.
Mhm. And if
Yeah.
I can add to that too, one of the things I do know is prevalent within all of our communities is our faith-based organizations, that
Yeah.
spiritual wellness, and we have to take a holistic approach to our lives. We spend a lot of time in at the gym and getting ourselves physically fit. We like to further our education and getting ourselves intellectually and mentally fit. But we also have to get ourselves spiritually fit, and making sure we maintain that spiritual connection to our faith leaders, to our church groups. There are a lot of support programs out there that focus around developing spirituality and really being in tune with yourself and with the world around you, and finding your center and being calm and relaxed and understanding who we are as it relates to this world we live
Great. Well, I think on that note, we'll just remind anyone who might be watching this that if you haven't taken a few minutes to kind of do a self check-in and where am I and how am I at and when was the last time that I paid attention to all those different factors of myself, we'd like to remind you to do that. Take a few minutes for that today. And Bill and Earl and Melissa, thank you so much for your time. This was a really productive conversation, and I hugely appreciate your time, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.